You may have heard of him. George Santos has lied about who he is as a person, what his accolades are when he's been running for office. He won his election, so this is very interesting. It's not just his college and work history, it's really about who he is as a person. Here's his smug shot, as we like to say. He first ran for Congress in 2020, and then in November of this year, he was elected to represent parts of northern Long Island and northeast Queens. Santos's exaggerations were first identified by the New York Times. So here are some of those claims. He said he worked at two prominent Wall Street banks, Citigroup and Goldman Sachs. He had obtained degrees in finance and economics from two New York colleges, that he was Jewish, that 4 employees of his company were killed in the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida in June of 2016. And the lies are now slowly being debunked. Look at this headline. Liar Representative-elect George Santos admits fabricating key details of his bio. So, regarding the banks, both Citigroup and Goldman Sachs couldn't find records verifying that George Santos told the Post, or they couldn't find records verifying he ever worked for them. He directly told the Post himself that he never worked directly for either firm and had used a poor choice of words. So just a big misunderstanding that he had worked at these two huge banks. Then regarding his financial education, so his collegiate background, he acknowledged he didn't graduate from any institution of higher learning at all. He said, "I'm embarrassed and sorry for having embellished my resume. I own up to that. We do stupid things in life." Then regarding being Jewish, and this is the kicker for me, honestly. "I never claimed to be Jewish. I am Catholic because I learned my maternal family had a Jewish background. I said I was Jew-ish." I want to stop there. I was Jew-ish. I mean, the play on words, it's offensive, really, in a time of rising anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, also hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, it's hysterical. I've been laughing about this all day. I think it's hilarious, but you're right. I mean, it is offensive amidst the rise of anti-Semitism, because why did he claim this? Because he's doing what conservatives falsely accuse liberals of doing, and he's playing identity politics to create some sort of, victimized identity for himself. He also said that they fled from Ukraine, so he tried to tie that in there too, which apparently also was not true. It's sick, but I can't look away. I mean, this guy's name is George Santos, but he acts more like George Costanza from Seinfeld. He's lied himself into a corner and is coming back to get his ass.
I don't know what happens next, but the lies didn't stop there. Regarding the Pulse nightclub shooting, Santos revised claims that a company he worked for lost 4 employees in the Pulse nightclub shooting. Santos said the 4 were in the process of being hired. So maybe they had exchanged some emails from some higher ups. Not a complete story there. Then finally, he stated, "My sins are embellishing my resume. I'm sorry." I mean, to use the word sins there, like, "Oh, you guys are accusing me of such terrible things. All I did was a little resume embellishment when I was running for public office to represent people." So a bunch of other politicians decided to call him out on Twitter. Here's what Ted said. GOP Congressman-elect George Santos, who has now admitted to his whopping lies, should resign. If he does not, then GOP leaders should call for a vote to expel Santos for Congress. So, I mean, Kurt Bardella said he's committed fraud. I would say, at the very worst fraud, at the very least, I mean, he lied to voters and didn't make good on his campaign promises, which is pretty much what everybody else does, that you're going to represent people, you have this background, turns out he's not the guy he said he was. That happens pretty often, but these lies are extreme. And what's weird is we don't know if they helped him get elected. We really don't. I mean, maybe the lies that he worked for big banks helped him get elected, but the lies that he was a gay Jewish man did not. We really don't know. But of course, as Rayyvana said, I think the conservatives are going to make the case that this plays into the classic liberal identity politics, which it does. But we don't know if this is why this guy won. It's a weird thing to do, and I'm not sure what his motivations were. Rayyvana?
Yeah, I mean, I think his motivations were to shift to the center more, not politically through his policies, but through these identities, so that he could frame himself as a more moderate candidate and be more, to appease more of the liberal centrist voters in New York. So he wasn't presenting himself as a far right, individual politician, as opposed to a moderate conservative, despite the fact that once he gets to Congress, he'll vote just as he would if he ran as like a far right Trumper. But to the constituents of the district who voted for him and now feel like they, got dealt a bad hand, it sucks. There's nothing they can do. There's nothing that Congress can do, procedurally to remove him from the seat. The only thing that can happen is that the GOP pressures him to step down, and they won't do it because they need that seat. So, there's no integrity in the Republican Party. I don't expect them at all to try to take this and sort of wash it and clean their PR throughout this. They're not going to do that. They're just going to let him vote the way they need him to vote in Congress. And then, if he loses in his reelection campaign, that's the only way to get him out. And it's sad because the constituents now have to deal with him for the next 2 years, even if they feel like this isn't the person I voted for, because he fabricated this. It's not even a version of him. It's somebody else to run that campaign.
I think the most plausible claim he made was that 4 of his colleagues were involved in the Pulse nightclub shooting. Because if he said, I worked at Walmart, it's one of the largest employers in the country, chances are in any batch of human beings, about, if there's 50, there's about 4 of them that probably worked at a big company like Walmart at some point in their lives. But then he says, it was part of the hiring process for a company I worked for, without naming the company. I mean, he's not even lying smartly. And the weird part about this story is when they describe his district, because growing up in the tri-state, you'll know very well that Northeast Long Island, very different from Queens. And the way they are cutting these districts to dilute the votes, sure enough, for people in Queens, to have this be a conservative seat, I think is a part of this story that we're not, talking about near enough. This is very clearly a terribly gerrymandered district. When you think about, the body of water between those 2 areas, they cut this like an L. There's no other way they could have, with Long Island being there and the island of Manhattan being in the middle. It's just ridiculous that these are the kind of districts we have where someone like this can win and represent people in Queens.
I think we also need to look at the DCCC for giving us this man, because it didn't take much research for journalists to uncover and expose and debunk all of his, fantasies that he told about himself. Why couldn't the DCCC conduct meaningful oppo research to get this information out to the voters before they voted? It's ridiculous. I mean, and I'm always saying that the Democratic Party is a party that wants to lose. They run like they want to lose. Their, policies are as if they want to lose. Everything they do is like, you're just attempting to lose. And you see the same thing here. If they had just done a little bit of research, invested a little bit of time and effort into a winnable district, they could have won. And instead, they were sitting on their hands. I don't know what they were doing. It's ridiculous.